Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be back with you guys today at Adobe Live. My name is Kelsey Slay. If you don't know me, I am a graphic designer, a content creator, and Adobe Design Evangelist. Um, with this session today, we're going to be deep diving into Illustrator and all sorts of different things that we can talk about today. The thing about Illustrator is that it is an amazing software. There's so much you can do in it, but it also is super, super complex. So with that being said, when you're a new user, it's kind of hard to learn it. It can be pretty overwhelming at the start, especially when you're first trying to get into graphic design as well as learn graphic design. Another thing with Illustrator is, with it being such a complex, big software, you could even be a user who's worked in Illustrator for a long amount of time and still discover new tips and tricks, new features. And so we're going to kind of talk about a lot of that today. As a content creator, I really focus on tips and tricks in Illustrator and kind of bite-sized like features in Illustrator to help you learn it. And so we're going to be deep diving in that today. So let's go ahead and hop right in. We have a lot to cover in a really short amount of time. So here, as a graphic designer, I am more of a brand designer. So I focus mostly in logos and branding and all the assets that go along with that. And so this was actually a Cat Cafe project I did. It's one of my favorite projects. But if you're a brand designer or even just a designer, you know that when you're creating stuff, you're going to have a lot of assets that you're going to need to export. And so even something like this, like these flowers, these clovers, I would probably design out a file with all sorts of the colors with these assets. And that can get really big. This is just a fraction of what a working file for me would look like. I didn't want to have a big working file on live where, it would just consume the whole screen, but I would have a ton more of these little artboards. And as you can see, if you've exported things, you know that you have to export kind of like what I would typically do before would be export everything one by one, my PNGs, all sorts of file formats. But with asset export, it's actually located in Windows. We're going to go all the way down to asset export. This panel is going to pop up. I did not know about this feature for the longest time, and so I definitely wanted to start off with this. And I actually made a TikTok video about this a little whiles ago that a lot of people had no clue this even existed. So I definitely wanted to include this into my live today. What you would do is you would select all of these assets and you would actually just drag and drop them into this panel. And what this is doing, it's kind of queuing these up. Not only that, but I can actually come in here and name all of these things. So I can kind of keep myself organized. If you know me, you know I'm not the most organized graphic designer, so this definitely helps me. And especially when you're working with different assets. As a brand designer myself, if I'm giving this to my client, I'm naming a lot of these things off, and I'm kind of naming them based off of color, all these assets and different things like that. So I'm not going to go through and name all of these, but you can actually do this in this panel right here, which will make your process so much easier. So not only that, you can add scales and different file formats. So I can export to SVG, I'll probably export to PNG, and I'll even export to JPEG. And here I can set my scale, my width, my height, my ratio, resolution, all of that stuff, and just select all and hit export. Now I'm not going to export so you don't hop over to my desktop and we'll stay in Illustrator. But this in itself has really sped up my own workflow as a graphic designer because I'm not necessarily having to sit here and export all these things one by one. You can't export to, Illustrator files or EPS files, but you can export to these, which I already kind of do whenever I hand off my files to people. So definitely want to start off with this tip because after making a video about it, a lot of people didn't know about it and it really is an amazing feature. So let's go ahead and hop over to the next one. I want to talk to you about the Magic Wand tool in Illustrator. A lot of designers don't know that the Magic Wand tool is in Illustrator. We typically think about that in Photoshop, but there is a Magic Wand tool in Illustrator. Like I said, I even made a video about this specific use case for the Magic Wand tool, and a lot of people didn't know it existed. So with these patterns, this is just a small pattern that I have of this cat cafe. And typically what I used to do is I used to select each individual component to recolor it. But if you've ever done this, you know how time consuming this can be. And even sometimes like this is a grouped object. If I was just to try to recolor it really quickly, it would recolor the whole thing. So that has made the process, that much longer. But with a Magic Wand tool, you're going to go ahead and grab it. And we're going to actually select one of these petals, which is going to select all of the petals, just the petals alone, not even the whole object. And we can actually recolor in just a few clicks. So just like that, we've been able to do this in just a matter of a few clicks instead of selecting everything manually, which is something that I definitely used to do. And that makes the process so much quicker. Now I'm going to check the chat really quick and see how we're doing. Welcome everyone. Okay, awesome. Yes, thanks so much for joining. So yeah, the Magic Wand tool, and if you've worked in Illustrator, you know that there's a lot of features in Illustrator that naturally do a lot of similar things. So if you've worked in Illustrator for any amount of time, you know that there's other options to recolor things, but this is the one that kind of is the fastest one to me. There's also an object one where you can actually select it and do global edit. I know a lot of people talk to me about that one after I showed them the Magic Wand tool. So yeah, whatever works best for you, whatever feature you feel most aligned with to use. And let's go ahead and go to the next one. Now, if you follow me at all, you know I've talked about this feature a lot, which is the mockup feature. This is actually a newer feature in Illustrator um, that was talked about at Adobe Max last year, but if you just happen to miss it, we now have the ability to do mockups in Illustrator, which is insane to me to think about. I remember going to design school and being told like, oh, you have to do, mockups in Photoshop. Well, now we can do them in Illustrator. And don't get me wrong, typically when we think of mockups, we think of Photoshop. We go find the perfect mockups for our project. I think finding mockups for my projects takes me longer than actually creating the project, in my own opinion. But now we have the capability to do mockup in Illustrator. So I have this cat that I created for this project. I'm going to kind of select it and put it on this cup, and we're going to go up to object. We're going to go all the way down to mockup, and we're going to do make. And Illustrator is going to mock this up for us. I don't even know how it works. It just works. And it's really insane to think that we can do this now. So let's let this load up and see how it mocks it up for us. And just like that, we do have full control of the size and position of this if we wanted to change it even after it's mocked up. But what's really cool about this is that it actually matches the perspective of the object. So if you drag it after it's mocked up, it's going to just mock up wherever, which is super crazy that Illustrator can now do this and we can position this. And I've used this on a variety of different mockups. If you look to the side, we have some mockup examples that you can kind of use with this feature. But, I actually posted about this not too long ago, and a lot of people were under the understanding that, or they thought they had to just use these mockups. This is not true. You can use whatever mockup you want. These are just examples. So obviously you can use these if you need to, but you can use this mockup feature on your own images as well. So like this cup was actually an image I pulled that's not even from, like, I think on here it's Adobe stock. This is not even from Adobe stock. This is the image that I found ages ago that I used on another project. So you can actually just use your own images. So just to clarify that, I think a lot of people think you have to use Adobe stock images or only these images on the side. That's not the case. There's a lot of amazing use cases for this. I'm thinking of people who maybe don't know Photoshop that well, or, they're using Illustrator and they're only using Illustrator, and so they can just stay in one app. Or even like if you're working with clients or a boss, instead of digging for the perfect mock-up, you can mock something up really quickly in Illustrator and not have to hop into Photoshop to show somebody something if it's just something really quickly. So that's enough about mock-up. Let's talk about the next tool, which is called the Smooth tool. Let me check the chat really quick and see how we're doing. Hey, everyone. Hope everyone's doing great. Chat, let me make sure I have this loaded up. Super excited to be with you guys today and talk to you. Awesome. So yeah, I want to talk to you about the Smooth tool. So this tool is definitely a favorite of mine. I know I say everything's my favorite, but I do really love this feature. Every time I create an illustration, I don't know about you guys, but every time I create an illustration, there's bound to be a few wonky anchor points. Like no matter what I do, I will always have a few wonky anchor points. And as you can see, like this cat, when I first created it, there was some of those anchor points right there. You could just see like, this is just wonky. It's not perfect. Any designer, honestly, anybody, not even just a designer, could look at this and say like, that's kind of messed up right there. So instead of having to manually try to change all these anchor points, I can actually select this path. Make sure you have the specific path you want to edit to smooth out. Don't, if other things on your illustration is perfect, definitely don't select those when you use this feature because it will smooth the whole thing out. And we're going to go up to object. We're going to go down to path, and we're going to use smooth. So this little bar is going to pop up, and then we can actually adjust this smoothness. And as you can see, it's slowly changing it. And I'll actually take it really far so you can kind of see how it functions. So you have full control of this. This is where we started. And you can kind of just smooth it until you feel like the lines are perfect. And even like that, in just a matter of a few clicks, we've been able to smooth out my typical wonky lines when I'm illustrating on this illustration. And there's so much use case for this. Like I said, I use it mostly for my illustrations on my few wonky anchor points when there's always those few. And I've even seen other people use it to smooth out fonts, different things like that. So definitely check that out and see if that fits into your own workflow. It definitely is a time saver for me. So let's go ahead and hop. We're going to go all the way to this artboard and talk about the retype feature. Now, this is another one of my favorites. And like I said, I know I say that about everything, but the retype feature is a newer feature that was announced at Adobe Max last October. Yeah. And it really is a true time saver. So if you're a designer like me, I'm a brand designer, so I mostly focus in logo creation and I'm working with a lot of type. I'm usually manipulating type. And that what comes with that is outlining your fonts almost all the time. And I tell myself all the time, like, make a copy, try to remember what the font name is, try to remember what the font name is. And most of the time, if I'm opening a file that I created 3 months ago, I will completely forget what the font name is. I'll have no clue what it is. And I find myself in the situation all the time. And I'm sure if you're a designer, you do too. Now, this is actually, an old logo I created for this project, and it's completely outlined, like I said, and I'm actually going to go over to this retype panel. With the font selected, I'm going to hit enter, and Illustrator is actually going to scan this font and tell me either what it is or fonts based off, like give me font suggestions based off the aesthetic. And if we look, this first one is the font. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that it's giving you not only Adobe font suggestions, but it's actually giving you suggestions based off of the fonts on your computer. So this Kindred font is a font that is not an Adobe font. I had this font like ages ago on my computer, used it for this project. So it's actually scanning not only Adobe fonts, but the own fonts in your font library. So this saves me a ton of time because not only now I know the name of the font, so I can continue on, I can actually apply this font to this outline text. Once it's applied, we'll exit. And this, after a million clicks, has become live text all over again. This feature has saved me so many times since it's been announced, especially as someone who will open up old files and realize that, yes, I did accidentally outline everything. So not only does it work on outline text, it also works on images. So I'm going to show you this example. This is a mock-up of an adoption certificate that I did for this project. And it has two different fonts on here, but there's no way for me to know it. And if you could see it, it's just an image. It's not like outlined or anything. So I can actually select it, go over to retype. We're going to hit enter. And here it's picking out these fonts, this type, and giving me suggestions. And as you can see, Kindred is right there. But even if we go down to this font, which is more of a simple font, we can see that it's giving me not only font suggestions that look like it, but it's given me the actual font. This one was an Adobe font. So even if I wanted to pull this for inspiration, or let's just say this was an image that I had on, found outside, like as a designer, I'm kind of constantly seeing design inspiration out in the wild, whether that's like at a bookstore or at a grocery store. And if you're anything like me, you have pictures of this design inspiration. You can actually upload those pictures of whatever font, and Adobe, the retype feature will give you font suggestions based off of those fonts. So this is, a really good tool for me as someone who collects fonts like candy and likes to build up my font library. So definitely check that out. It will save you a ton of time, especially in the long run, with if you're someone who outlines fonts just like me. So let's go ahead and go over to the next tool, which is the pencil tool. Now, a lot of people are familiar with the pencil tool, and the pencil tool is an amazing tool. I use it a lot for illustrating. It's a tool over here in this panel, but I'm actually going to show you another use case for the pencil tool, which is editing your type. So here I have this outline text. I'm going to go over, let's see, where's my pencil tool? Here it is. Make sure, pencil tool right here. You can actually use the pencil tool to edit your text. And I think this tool, use case for this tool was trending a while back on social media. And a lot of people had no idea that you could use the pencil tool to edit your text. So I would definitely want to include it on here if you're somebody who didn't see any of those videos. But here I have this text and, we have it selected. We can actually go in with the pencil tool and change up this text. Now I'm on a trackpad, so no judgment, guys. This is just to show you how it works. But just like that, I've been able to edit my text. I'm not saying it looks great, but this is just how you use the tool. You know what I'm saying? And I can even come in here and customize my text. Like if I wanted to use it on another letter, you would just reselect. We'll go down here and we'll do this. Now, I would recommend not using a trackpad. It's not the best to use this. But I've seen a lot of use case in the pencil tool for using it on not only type, but I've even seen designers use it on like a base layer of just plain text and pencil tooling out their whole font. And just editing things, really bringing that custom feel. So definitely check this out if you didn't know this was a use case. If you did, definitely use it. It's an amazing way to customize your text and get more of a hand drawn effect. But like I said, don't use a trackpad. The trackpad will make it look a little wonky, not gonna lie. So let's go over to the next one. I'm gonna check the chat and see how we're doing. What's up, guys? Everyone's here. This is so fun. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So let me exit. Let's see. So I want to talk to you about distort and transform. Now, this is, when I was new to Illustrator, I really thought I had to pen tool everything. And if you know me, I have a love-hate relationship with the pen tool. It can be kind of complex and harder to master, at least in my own work. And something that I used to do was any trending shape or any sort of shape that I wanted to create, I always felt like I had to pen tool this. And that's not necessarily the case, especially with effects. And like I said, Illustrator is a pretty complex software. So when I first started specifically, I was always hanging out in like this region over here, or even this side with all these panels. I wasn't really going up to effects and really checking out any of these things. Like these are pretty tucked away. So I'm going to select this shape right here. We're going to go up to Effect, Distort, and Transform. And I'm just going to talk about Pucker and Bloat and Zigzag because, this is a lot to kind of go through. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll talk about my favorite ones. And let's go ahead and open Pucker and Bloat. I did not know for the longest time that I could use these to make different shapes. Like here I'm making this sparkle. This is kind of a trending shape. I love a good sparkle. We see sparkles everywhere. And I always used to try to pen tool these sparkles. And like I said, they would come out a little wonky. But with the power of Pucker and Bloat, I can actually create this sparkle with just a few clicks. And even then, it can do other shapes. So here we have Pucker and Bloat. Let's go up to Effects. We're going to go Distort and Transform. And we're actually going to bloat this. And here I'm kind of creating out these petals. This is another way to make flowers or just make a trending shape. And, like I said, I used to pen tool a lot of this stuff out. I didn't really ever look at effects in Illustrator. I didn't think like, I don't know. I was like, oh, I'll just pen tool them and making my life so much harder. And so you can even just take that, and kind of create a flower if you need to. So the thing about Illustrator that I love is that, one, there's a lot of ways to make different things in Illustrator, but sometimes you may be doing things the hard way. And if sometimes you can find a feature or something that will make your life a lot easier. And that's kind of what Pucker and Bloat did for me was that, once I figured out I can do it this way, I don't necessarily have to sit here and pen tool everything out. Cause like I said, I have this, the pen tool and me, we get along sometimes, but not all the time because it's pretty complex. So let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and show you zigzag as well, because it's also, not only does this work on shapes, this works on lines, it works on a bunch of things. So I'm just showing you some shapes. So we're going to go up to Effect, Distort and Transform, Pucker and Bloat. Oh wait, no, not that one. We're going to go to zigzag. We're going to go down to Effects, zigzag, and definitely check out these other ones. Like we don't have all the time today to go through all of these, but just come and play around with these. Like this really will, just playing around in Illustrator will teach you more than just like trying to figure it all out on your own. And here we can kind of adjust all of these. We have full control of these ridges, the size. We can even make the corners smooth if we want to. We can make them straight if we want to. You have full control to edit this as you see fit and create some of these shapes instead of pen tooling them all out. So definitely check out this area in Illustrator to make some of these shapes and all sorts of things. And when you're done, be sure just to go up to Object, Expand Appearance, so it actually becomes an object. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this up because I had no clue for a long time about any of these features or effects. I just had never gotten around to like looking at any of these and was doing everything the hard way. So let's go ahead and move on. I want to talk to you guys about Intertwine. This feature was an amazing feature that we talked about, this was like 2 Adobe Maxes ago. This feature took over the internet. And if somehow you didn't see it, I want to show you today because it really is an amazing feature. And especially as a brand designer, I have really used this feature on a lot of my logo designs and all sorts of things. So let's just say you have two objects. It doesn't necessarily have to be type, but let's just say you have two objects. I'm going to take this little flower and just kind of show you how this feature works. And let's just say I was playing around and saying like, oh, maybe I can make this intertwine and create this look or whatever. I can select both objects, go up to object. We're going to go down to intertwine and we're going to go make. And you can play around with the position of this if you need to, but even just by clicking, you can intertwine two objects. And even then you can kind of play around with this, like, oh, I don't really like that. Let's kind of do this where it's kind of in this flower, all sorts of things. If you don't like that, you can actually unselect this and redo it. Like, I think I want to position this a little bit different. You can just release it. So you never lose the integrity of these objects, which is really awesome. And I can say I want this a little bit bigger. And what I like about this is that, especially when you're like, as a logo designer myself, when I'm kind of creating logos, sometimes I just want to see how something looks. And having to do intertwine objects manually can be really time consuming. So kind of being able to hop in and just see how this is, and you can kind of just see how it's intertwining the two objects, and you can make edits as you see fit. So that's another thing, is if I kind of look at it, don't like it, we can edit it and bring this back forward. You can also drag your cursor and select, but it's gotten really good at hovering where the two objects are intertwining and you being able to position these. So this is definitely an amazing feature. I use it all the time in my own work, so definitely check that out. Now let's go ahead and hop to this one. We're kind of veering from the cats because this works a lot better for this example, and I'll show you as quickly as I can because I know we're coming at time. Envelope distort and kind of type manipulation. This is a really amazing feature. We're going to go up to object, have this type selected. We're going to go over to make with warp. And here we have all these warp options to warp your text. Now, if you're someone who, doesn't believe in stretching text, close your eyes. This whole portion is about stretching text and type manipulation. But here we have all these options that we can play with for type and warping type and fitting into whatever you need it to do for whatever project. So this is really fun to play around with instead of manually trying to do this. We can adjust these to our liking. So another thing with this is we have full control of this whole warp. So I'm going to hop over to the next one and we're going to go to make, let's see, envelope distort, make with mesh. So we can actually add in rows and columns. When we do that, we can take our direct selection tool and we can go up here and manipulate this type. Like I said, if you don't like to see type stretch, close your eyes. This just makes our text really editable and we can really manipulate this type out, which is super fun. Lastly, I want to talk to you about make with top option, which is another feature of envelope distort. And this is all around type manipulation. We'll select both objects. We'll go down to envelope distort and we're going to do make with top object. And it's actually going to insert this type into whatever object you have. So I have this circle. We can adjust this if we want it to be more legible. If you want it to be illegible, go right ahead. We love an anti-design moment. And another thing with this is that this is kind of envelope distort is all around really type manipulation. And it was a feature that I didn't know about for a really, really long time. So definitely be sure to check that out. To manipulate your text, kind of create some more fun work and just play around with these features. It's another one that's kind of tucked away that I didn't know about for a long time. So that is kind of a roundup of some of my favorite features. I hope you guys really enjoyed this little demo of just some of my favorite features in Illustrator, and hopefully you learned something. Like I said, Illustrator is a pretty complex software, so you'll learn as you go. And even if you're a designer who's been designing in it for a really long time, there's still tons of features that you may stumble upon. So hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much, chat, for joining along, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.